Hey, what's going on YouTube and the Gospel Gambit Chess School community? My name's Kevin, aka Gospel Gambit, and I want to welcome you guys in for part 3 of our series on the Leonhardt Gambit. This is our opening guide, and today we're going to be going over the declined variations of this opening, most notably Queen to B6 and Queen to E5 by Black. If you haven't done so already, go check out parts 1 and 2. Part 1 gives a nice general overview of the opening as a whole, and some ideas of why we're choosing to play this. Part 2 goes over the accepted variation of this gambit. It shows you key pieces and what squares they're supposed to go on, as well as we go over a few model games showing you how to attack with the white pieces when they're all coordinating and they're all in sync with each other. Today, let's dive right into the declined variations. So without further ado, e4, d5. Of course, we take the pawn, queen takes, knight to c3, and queen to a5. This is our starting position after we strike with the move b4. Obviously, if black takes the pawn, they've accepted the gambit, and we go over a bunch of those lines in the part 2 of this opening guide series. Today, though, we're going to be taking a dive into two of the major declined variations, queen to b6 and queen to e5 check. They are played about 10% of the time each, according to Lichess. So you're going to see black take the pawn close to 75% of the time, and then 20% of the time play the moves queen to b6 and queen to e5. And as you can see below here, anytime they play any of these moves, well, we just win black's queen. If you're a blitz player or a bullet player and you face this, I'm sure you're going to be able to pick up quite a few queens here. In my own games, on my other account, this is the McKnight account that I played on originally the last 4 years before starting up Gospel Gambit. As you can see, I got 5 games where I just win a free queen out of the opening. And all the other games are either the accepted variations or this e5 or b6 move. And as you can see, we do pretty well with this opening, winning close to 60% of our games in the accepted variations, close to 66 or 2 out of 3 games in the queen e5, and 50-50 with the queen b6. This loss we're going to go over today, actually, was one of the first times facing this queen to b6 move, and I did a grave mistake in overchasing black's queen, but we'll dive into that later. So without further ado, we're going to dive into the queen e5 check first. This isn't too scary of a move. We're simply going to keep developing our pieces with bishop to e2. Right now we have 2 pieces developed. Black's queen is in the center of the board. We have knight to f3 coming soon, going to force black's queen to move yet again. And here really has 3 different branching off points. The most played is c6, and we'll look at that first. With c6, we're of course just going to play the move knight to f3. Look at this already. Black is forced to move their queen, and as you can see, about 90% of games, black drops it back to c7, a pretty safe square for their queen. And we are able to just castle, and we are already safely castled to black's complete undevelopment of their board. We've traded off a center pawn each. We've developed 3 pieces. We're castled, and all of black's pieces are still sitting on the back rank. Computer gives it a half point advantage, but I believe you guys are going to have a very comfortable game moving forward, as black's the one that has to untangle, as opposed to us having to untangle our pieces. We can start our attack right away. Now, black should just continue with this move, either knight to f6 or bishop to f5. As you can see, the second most played move is this bishop g4. We talked about this move a little bit in the accepted variation. Players that play this queen a5 or just the Scandinavian and whole love this move bishop to g4 for some reason. They love trying to checkmate people on h2 with the classic fishing pole maneuver. After we play h3, they play h5, take, and the black's queen and their rook are coordinating on the h2 file after we move our knight. So you're going to see a lot of games, black just trying to get their bishop out to g4, thinking that that's a positive move in their direction, when in fact And we can take a look at that actually. After bishop to g4, we have this nice move, knight to e4. Pretty much saying that black, you forgot to develop your knight to f6, and if you do so, we are going to take, forcing you to take away from the center, and all of a sudden, our major pieces are going to be firing down at black's king, which still has 1, 2, at least 3 moves before they're castled. If you want to continue on, if they play f6, we just take, and slide our rook over to e1, and we're going to have a wonderful game from there. If they decide to play, let's say, knight b to d7, well, we can either play b5, c4. You can expand pretty much in the middle. You can play bishop to b2, staring down this wonderful dark square diagonal. Pretty much you have a ease of developing your pieces. Black's kind of forced to support their knight to f6 move, pretty much giving us another tempo in developing. If they don't play bishop to g4, then black will probably develop with knight to f6. We strike in the middle with d4. You're going to see this kind of set up a lot in a bunch of our variations today. Black could easily play knight to g or bishop to g4 again, in which case after h3, white pretty much has to take the knight here. You can see the top move is not to take the knight, and after they drop it back, all of a sudden black's position starts to get kind of shaky. After this move d5, trying to entice black to remove this defender of b5, all of a sudden our knight is getting very active on black's queen, and we're chasing black's queen around yet again, and soon we're going to just be swarming black's queen with all sorts of ideas of attacking this c7 square. We get nice development with our dark square bishop. If we really wanted to, we can try to pick up a free rook, force black to either play all sorts of different moves here, but you guys are going to have a wonderful game. So if black does not take this knight on f6, correction, on f3, then you guys are going to have a great game. Just remember bishop to f4 and knight to b5 after pushing this d-pawn up the board. After d5, if black does follow the main line here, well, we can just continue with our development of our rooks. And after a move like e6, black is completely lost again. They're just trying to get their pieces untangled here, but their e-file is going to be blown wide open after d takes e. So remember this d strike in any of the ideas of black bringing their bishop out to g4. If black plays the move bishop to f5, this is a totally fine move. They're just trying to get their bishop outside of the pawn chain before getting castled. Here we can continue with our plan like we had in the accepted variation, moving our rook over to b1. It'll support pushes of our b pawn later on in the game, as well as again can slide up to the third rank and put pressure on black's king. And after a move like e6, we can attack black's light squared bishop, trying to win the bishop pair at the very least, and we're going to have about a half-point advantage going into the middle game. Now, if we dive back into, instead of c6, if black goes for the immediate bishop to g4, trying to put maximum pressure here on e2, we can strike right away at black's queen with the move d4. Black now does not have time to take on e2 with their bishop, and they're forced again to move their queen. Obviously, if they take, we take back with the knight, and after a move such as queen to either h5 or queen to d6, we're going to have a great game. Again, none of black's pieces are developed. Black's queen is running around the board. We're one move away from castling, and one move away from developing our last bishop onto the board and putting an attack onto black's position. If black plays the move knight to f6, we can continue with the same game plan, similar to when they played c6. We'll simply just bring our knight out to f3, and after queen to d6, we can simply castle or bring our rook over to b1. It's kind of, you guys have the choice here. Again, all of our pieces are being developed quite freely, and black is really going to have a struggle getting untangled here as we head into the middle game. As for the other variation, so if black chooses to go queen to b6, here we can simply just develop all of our pieces naturally. Knight to f3. If black plays c6, which is the most played move, we can play rook to b1 here, actually. This is a good move to remember. So in the queen to b6 lines, knight f3 and rook to b1 is definitely a key idea to remember. Now anytime that we push the b file, we can try to open it up, create discovered attacks on black's queen here moving forward. You could see bishop to g4 in this position, or knight f6. Bishop to g4, we simply attack black's bishop again. And remember, kind of like the last video, if they drop it back, well, bishop to e2, we're castling, and we're going to put pressure with d4, bishop to f4, and try to crack open black's center once again. If they play knight to f6, here the computer suggests g3. I think an easier move to remember, though, is just either to play d4, taking control of the center, or bishop to e2, kind of sidestepping this bishop to g4 move. We get castled. Obviously with d4, we can have our dark squared bishop deployed to a better square. But same idea, bishop's going to come out to e2, bishop out to f4 more than likely, get castled, and continue on with our middle game. As for the main line, not the main line here, but if black insists on this move, bishop to g4, so again, queen to b6, knight to f3, and bishop to g4. It's the second most played move in this position. I'm telling you guys, black loves to play this move, bishop to g4, even though it is not a good move against us in this type of opening. And in this position, we have a nice little move of knight to d5, hitting black's queen. And depending on where they move it, let's say queen to e6, we can drop our knight back into e3. And after a move such as bishop to e2, we're going to be winning the bishop pair. Let's say knight to f6, bishop to e2. And we are easily getting castled here, playing moves such as d3 or d4, winning the bishop pair on the next move if black isn't too careful, and all sorts of good stuff for us. If they end up playing, let's say, bishop to queen to d6, we can continue again with this knight to e3 maneuver, and after bishop drops back to h5, we can strike with this interesting g4 right away. If we continue the line here, obviously black decides to drop their bishop back, and we fianchetto our own bishop onto the g2 square. We're one move away from castling. Both of our knights are in the central positions of the board. In this position, we have the option to fianchetto our other dark square bishop to b2, or even play a move such as d3, move our bishop up to d2, and have a great middle game. So after knight f6, castled, and you guys should have a great position. In all these lines, if you guys were following around with the evaluation, we were pretty much a half a point to a point advantage in a lot of these different lines. I'll put this Lichess study in the video description below, or if you're on our school page, it'll be in the classroom for you guys to tab through. I definitely suggest going through some of the different side variations of if black missteps and how to respond accordingly to those moves. One game I did want to show you guys when I was first learning this variation was on my Qa5 Gambit account. We were 1956 at the time. And I hadn't played too many games against this queen to b6 move, and I thought that we could just drive our pawns at black's queen, really try to tear open these light squares around the queen side that black was creating. And I kind of got fallen into the trap of overextending my pawns, thinking that I could win black's queen here, or falling into the trap of an unguarded rook on our a square. Like we saw in almost all the variations today, our goal is to get a heavy development lead against black. While their queen's jumping around and making all these crazy moves, we're able to get 3, maybe 4 pieces out onto the board before black has even moved 1. Or the fact that they haven't developed either their queen side or their king side and are far away from castling themselves before we are able to send an attack against black's position. So this is just a good instructive game to realize that we can't just send the a pawn down the board with the b pawn. We have to coordinate with our other pieces and make sure that our pieces ourselves are defended along the back rank. Going from there, we have a second game. This is a game that went well. This was back 1600s, a blitz game. Just showing you guys a little bit of the power here. So this was a queen e6 game that I played. Bishop to e2, bishop to f4, knight f3, hitting black's queen again, castled. As you can see, black's queen is very vulnerable here in the middle of the board. We're already castled, 3 pieces developed. Rook easily come into e1 soon, and other pieces entering the game. And again, if black doesn't play this move c6, it's a very important move in a lot of their positions. A lot of times their queen side can crumble very fast. So this move, knight to d7, not only does it not defend this b5 square, but now it takes away all of black's retreating moves with their queen that would defend c7. So after the move knight to b5, black decides to slide their queen over. Again, we were hitting their queen with this dive into the b5 square. If black allows us, a lot of times we are going to take advantage of this knight to b5 maneuver. After a few more moves, I was thinking of this idea of sliding my bishop over, trying to dislodge black's queen and fully be able to take on the c7 square. And as you can see, black's position crumbles here as more and more of our pieces enter the game. Black, again, very slow on developing and getting over castled on their king side. And so our goal is really to try to put pressure on either the c7 square or in the middle of the board with a lot of those d4, d5 moves. If we can tear open the middle of the board, get our rooks into the game before black's castled, you guys are going to have a lot of success with this opening. Again, just like in the last video, if you guys end up playing this opening and you get some of the declined games, please post them below or share them with me here on YouTube or in our school games channel. And without further ado, guys, have a great night.